This is Mandatory Listening. I'm your host, Kent Mann. Each week, we sit down over a cup of coffee and discuss interesting topics in the world of the customer experience. Welcome back to Mandatory Listening. This is your host, Kent Mann. And I'm joined today by someone who has not been on the podcast before, and that is our very own Tony Tanner. Hi, Tony.
Hey, Kent. How you doing?
I'm doing good. It's about 9:45 in the morning, and I think over in Houston, it's about 8:45.
That is exactly right.
We were dealing with some technical difficulties this morning, but with our ingenuity, our creativity, and just pure intellect, we were able to figure it out by just reloading the page a few times, I think.
Well, we kind of have a saying around here amongst ourselves is that we can get really good at plan B.
Yeah, that's right. And C and D. So, Tony, you are our resident Game of Thrones / Star Wars fanatic. I think that's self-described too. So fanatic is not derogatory in any way.
No, not at all. I actually take that as a compliment. But I don't think I'm alone in that boat. I might be at the front trying to guide that boat, or I might be at the back steering it. But I think we're all in that same boat together.
We definitely are, yeah. And before we started recording, you were talking about the new Adidas Ultra Boost Game of Thrones version. So I think you're on the top of the pre-order list, or right when it hits, you're going to press order.
Yeah, I don't think you're allowed to pre-order them, but as soon as they go on sale, I'm going to go in there and see if I can get a pair.
Who is your favorite character?
That's really a hard one to answer because I like so many of them, of course, everything from Jon and Daenerys. I also love the Hound or Xandor Clegane because of he's not intending to be funny, but he actually is. But I don't know, if I had to pick one, I would almost go with Arya Stark because, to me, she has really proven herself to be just the ultimate survivor.
Yeah, I think so too. Like the whole dynamic of her journey. I think that out of most of the people in the show, she's probably traveled the most.
Oh.
She's kind of been there, done that, and she kind of puts Sansa to shame a little bit in a lot of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But not too many spoilers on today's podcast.
Yeah, no, and not at all. But, I love it too because, she's looks like this small, sweet, unassuming girl, and then you mess with her and you're going to find yourself with your throat missing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and a vicious little smile on her face.
Exactly. She does her little lemonade walk, after she leaves you bleeding on the floor.
Yeah, that's right. All right, cool. Well, today we're not talking just about Game of Thrones, although we probably could for a couple hours. We are talking about video training, and that is something that we hold a lot of opinions about, something that we feel could be done better, and also is not a replacement for actual training. So just first impressions, Tony, when I say video training, what comes to your mind?
The way the vast majority of the retail world trains their people.
And you spent quite a bit of time in the retail world. Just give a brief synopsis of your time in retail and then follow that with your experience with video training personally. Like what kind of video training have you seen or done?
Yeah, gosh. We could be here a long time just talking about, my experience in retail. But, I've done everything from being a buyer, having various leadership and executive leadership positions with different companies. I've even, for a short time worked for a manufacturer or a brand, if you will. And then, of course, the decade or more of experience with the Man Group, which allows us to really kind of see all of retail from a 10,000 foot view, if you will, because, we work with retailers, brands, nonprofits. I mean, everything that's out there. And what I've seen is the lack of investment in developing people, in my opinion, is what is wrong and what's killing brick and mortar retail today. It's not the internet. It's not, outside forces. It's not even in many cases the economy. It is the people who are in front of the customer are the least paid, the least trained, and the least developed, but yet that person represents everything your organization stands for to that customer they are interacting with, or in many cases, that customer that they're ignoring and not interacting with.
Yeah. And I remember going back to what you just said, it sparked a reminder for me. One of our strategic planning meetings, you mentioned how retail is a highly developed skill.
Mm-hmm.
and that it is a proficiency. It takes development. It takes not just intellect, but competency. You have to have, a certain knack for it, almost a certain kind of personality for it if you're dealing with people all day, the customer facing side of things. But what would we also put under the category of a highly developed skill? I mean, the things that come to mind are a nurse or a doctor or a pilot.
Hmm.
And those people, I don't think, hop on a video training website and then do a couple hours and now they can fly a plane.
Hmm.
So what's your take on that? What kind of highly developed skill is this?
Well, another example, I mean, even, great coaches or even great point guards, quarterbacks, linebackers, whatever you want to think about it, is a highly developed skill. It takes tremendous intelligence because you've got to learn the game plan and what you're supposed to be doing. And then it takes months and months and many times years and years of hard effort put into practice to become proficient. And the focus is all put on the product and training staff about the product. And if they know everything about the product, or they've worked in the industry for a long time, then that means that they can sell it. They have what they need to be able to take care of the customer. And that's only one half or one side of the coin. The other side of it is the future of retail today. And we've talked about this in our other podcasts, is that what people are looking for today is an experience. So it is specialty retail. It is experiential retail, if I'm saying that correctly. And that is 100% dependent upon people within your organization being able to deliver the experience that the customer standing in front of them wants. And I'm not talking about a cookie cutter approach. I'm not talking about a one size fits all. And that's the approach that many companies try to take. There's even a very large hotel chain out there right now that, their motto is, well, we treat our guests the way we want to be treated. Well, okay, that's assuming that everyone wants to be treated the same. But in actuality, and yeah, there are some common threads that run through that. We want people who are friendly. We want people to be nice and smiling and different things like that. But the difference is in where you can really create the magic and really differentiate your business is being able to create the experience and find out what that customer standing in front of you wants on an individual basis. And that is a extremely highly developed skill.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think anyone listening to this should probably rewind and listen to that whole monologue again, because there was some gems in there. Because if someone walks through the door, and this is the problem that I think a lot of companies make with their training, because the video training market is huge. And so the big blind spot that I see in that industry and with the companies using that industry is that they think that before the customer ever walks through the door, they know how I'm supposed to treat them.
Yes.
And so they train to that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think you just said, and the Man Group would absolutely double down on the idea that in order to figure out what kind of experience this customer wants who's standing in front of me, I have to do some work. And that's what no one wants to do, because they feel like if I throw enough statistics, enough product knowledge, enough whatever, then I'm going to gain some rapport and I'm going to build my trust with this person. So that way they're going to trust me to, upsell them or have them come back and write me a nice review or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're absolutely right. And part of where it starts is that, and you're right, not only do we double down on this, we actually push all of our chips to the center of the table and we're all in. One of the biggest issues for companies is that they see training and development as one of their largest expenses, just like payroll and their people, instead of seeing it as perhaps even their largest, most significant investment. And the money gets put into a lot of the sexy, flashy categories, if you will, like marketing or store design or product, or even to some, degree, visual merchandising. And those are all well and good, but it's the experience that the customer has in your store that makes all of that come together. And your people's ability to deliver that experience is ultimately what gives you a return on investment or not on all of those other things that you spend all that money on.
Yeah, what you said with the visual merchandising, the sexy new product, the store layout, the nice fixtures, the wall decorations, the uniforms, whatever it may be, all that stuff is now the standard.
Mm-hmm.
If you are investing that, like, you're already behind the curve
Mm-hmm.
because people expect that.
Oh,
People
yeah.
expect a clean store. People expect uniforms. People expect X, Y, or Z. That's no longer innovative anymore. What is innovative is developing those soft skills.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have all that sexy product, you have that, the nice store layout, the great visual merchandising, people are coming into your store because they're attracted to it. And then you have an absolute dunce behind the register, just making an absolute fool of himself.
Mm-hmm.
All that investment is now gone.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a combination of, and we talked about this a lot in the couple of recent podcasts this season, that it is a combination of hiring, branding, the vision of the company, but also training soft skills. Because
Absolutely.
being able to build credibility and build rapport and ask great questions and build trust with somebody, that is a highly developed skill. And so if you are really good at working the sales floor at retail, you're probably really good at a bunch of other things that also include those soft
Mm-hmm.
skills.
Absolutely. And something that should terrify CEOs or CFOs or all the leadership of any organization, or in many cases, so many of the businesses that we work with, the actual owner themselves, is number one, in most cases, when a customer comes into your store or your business, they never get to meet you. They never get to experience who you are and the passion that you have for that business. And in many cases, we work with so many of the owners, and I asked the question. I said, if you were waiting and you were helping a customer, would that customer get an A+ experience? And more times than not, it is a resounding yes. But here's the cold hard truth: it is rare that a customer interacts with you, and even more scary, in many cases, when a customer comes in, they don't care who you are. They care about the person standing in front of me. Can they deliver the experience that I am looking for? And if they can't, I'm going somewhere else. Because let's face it, in our world today, we as consumers, we wield all of the power we have for quite some time, and we are never giving it up.
Yep, that's a good point. And it's like you may have this image of, let's say, like Adidas or Nike or something like that, like a higher end sports brand. You have this image of Adidas. You say they have the highest quality product, their brand, their aesthetics of their shoes are just top notch. You believe all this stuff. And you really like their CEO or their owner, like their vision of their company. You really resonate with the vision of their company. When you go into an Adidas outlet store, and you get treated like absolute garbage, all of your preconceived notions about the brand quality, the aesthetics of the shoe, the vision of the company, which, the owner could very artfully say, communicate, resonate, all of that goes out the window because you just got this bad experience. It's like when your vision of a brand is ruined because you got a dud. Like,
Mm-hmm.
let's say you buy a car, and then within the first month of buying a car, the engine goes out. That brand is now sullied for you, even if the vision statement of the car company is to say, we have the most reliable cars on the market.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yes.
doesn't matter what they say to you or what their vision is, because your experience, which happened today, counteracted that.
Yeah, it made you walk out the door, and the money that the person was willing to spend with you, that walked out the door. But now I'm also out there talking to everyone that I encounter, not just who I speak to verbally, but even through social media contacts. And, let's face it, the uber connected world we live in today. I am now out there in the marketplace, and I am not a fan of your brand, and I'm telling everyone about it.
Yeah, and I think statistically, it's something like at least 10 people verbally
Oh,
that
yeah.
you'll say,
Mm-hmm.
that you'll at least mention within a few days' time, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get back to actually video training.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the video training in and of itself is flawed? Or do you think that it could be done better in a way that's more operable?
It could be done better, and there is a place for it. And our belief, my belief, I'll get to that here in a little bit, but let's first examine why companies do it in the first place. And it typically revolves around cost and time, that they think that it costs less to do video training versus investing in person or one-on-one or actual live training. And then secondly, time, because in the world we live in today, for those of you who are out there that are responsible for training and developing people, I get it. I understand. Most of us within this company have been in your role. And when you think about training new people or retraining or training on a new subject or topic or a point of sale system, whatever it may be, that training is on top of everything else you have to do. So those are one of the two big reasons why people and companies turn to video training. And whereas we think that it's saving us money, what we've got to look at as we come back around, just as we talked about a few moments ago, Ken, is that the key to success in business is being able to deliver the experience that the customer standing in front of you wants. But if our people can't do that, it actually ends up costing us more in the long run. So, I think for many companies, those are the two big reasons why they do it in the first place.
Especially with, we could write out a spreadsheet here if we were being video recorded for this podcast. Just write out the cost of a bad hire, the cost of 2 weeks of training that ends up with an employee fired, and then bad customer experiences that while they were working on the sales floor in the first 2 weeks, just burn those bridges. It really starts to add up. And we may have done, I think Dan mentioned in a few podcasts ago, just that numerical dollar amount is pretty drastic.
Just for one person, not only a bad hire, it can cost you, because if you keep that person on for a year, it can end up costing your company over $100,000 per year. But what we don't think about is for every single retailer out there that's listening right now, whatever day this is, when you're open, your business is probably missing 20 to 60% of the business that you could be capturing that's already coming in your door.
Yeah, especially if you've got your marketing or your visual merchandising or your store layout really well done, but you just have an incompetent sales floor. They're running the customers out of the door.
Yeah, and not just an incompetent sales force, but an incompetent manager. Because training and developing people is also in itself a highly developed skill. But instead of, when we tend to think of training, we tend to think of it in blocks of time of the year, that I only can do training this time of year when it's slow, versus, the way we work and what we show leaders and managers is that developing your people can be and should be just part of your normal daily activity.
Yeah, that's a good point. The daily, not every 2 weeks, not once a month huddle. Training should be an everyday part of your company's culture. And
absolutely.
And I think too, like one of the big missing points of video training is the whole idea of a coach. There's no coach involved in a video training.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
And the role of the coach, I'll just say quickly, is to watch, observe, and give feedback.
Absolutely. 100%. And as a leader, as a manager, you get no better return on investment of your time than taking someone every single day and helping them, supporting them, sponsoring them, developing them, and ultimately making them better.
Yeah, exactly. And not only for revenue, for increased sales, more productivity per payroll dollar. You can get down and dirty with the math if you want to, but it also just, it helps build a team of constant improvement, of constant feedback. I mean, what is the net effect of having a team of, let's say, 10 people on the sales floor rotating full-time, part-time, that are constantly giving each other feedback, constantly telling each other how they can improve, constantly watching each other's behavior? I would say the net effect of that, on one hand, is you have a team that's constantly improving. On the other hand, you have a team that's constantly getting better at coaching, which is a highly developed skill.
And you're going to end up with a business that is not only sustainable, but will be successful in today's incredibly complex world and marketplace.
Yeah, I think when we've talked about, I know in the first season, one of our first podcasts was the one on millennials. And one of the trends, if you just Google like millennial habits or whatever, or millennial traits or something like that, it's like they want to be part of something bigger or want to be involved with something that is meaningful or has a message or something. I can't think of a better environment for that sort of bigger than me. I'm part of something involved and doing something great than an environment that is constantly improving.
Hmm.
One of our traits for a great employee is being an integrator, being able to tell the truth and tell it well. If you can tell someone what they just did wrong and how they can improve, and you can tell it in a way that's respectful, constructive, useful, and measurable, that is the best way to get better at anything, really. And,
Hmm.
and I think that is, I just want to go back and repeat that that is the missing link for video training, is that there is no coach involved.
Hmm. It also, because there is no coach involved in it, the leader in many cases is absent from it. It right from the very beginning, you fall into one of the pitfalls of why video training doesn't work solely on its own in developing people is because the video will not set the expectations for you. The video, you don't have the ability to begin the accountability piece, and that is clearly define what you expect from this person.
What would that look like? Can you give me like just an elevator pitch real quick of what it is to establish that expectation?
In many cases, when we are training and we're developing people, we are talking about changing behavior, and change requires a compelling reason why. So you don't have the opportunity to, number one, tell people why or show people why you are doing this. Why do we need to improve? Why do we need to get better? But it doesn't allow you to clearly define what your expectations are from this.
Yeah, because you can't assume that someone wants to get better. And that's
Hmm.
a pitfall of assuming, let's say you're the owner or manager of a store and you've got 10 people on your staff, and you just make the assumption that all of them want to show up an hour early to open the store up. They want to make as much money as possible for the company, not necessarily for themselves if they're being paid hourly. They want to clean the bathroom. They want
Hmm.
to X, Y, or Z. It doesn't matter.
Hmm.
If you make the assumption that someone wants to do something just because they feel like they're part of it, you're setting yourself up for disaster. And so I think that, or at least you're setting yourself up for disappointment, because if
Hmm.
you assume that
Abs-
someone wants to get better, you're going to be disappointed.
yeah. To me, what you're talking about there is buy in. And even if you, as a leader, communicate your why and you communicate your expectations, and then you sit somebody down in front of a video and say, okay, so I want you to watch this video. It's going to teach you what I want you to learn. You don't know if you have buy in from the trainee. Number one, do they feel they need to learn this? I mean, how many times have we been in all of the industries that we work in and we hear the phrase, I've been doing this for 20 years. I don't need to learn anything. I know what I'm doing. I know everything I need to know.
Yeah, we've got a pretty good staff as is.
Yeah, we've got a pretty good staff as is. So, number one, does the person even feel they need to learn? And then, secondly, do they want to learn? Do they think that this is worth their time? And they'll sit there and you can't see whether or not you have buy in because they may tell you, oh, yeah, I watched the video. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was awesome. I learned a lot. But number one, you don't even know if they even listened to it or absorbed any of it because we can't tell if we have buy-in or not.
Yeah. And now, instead of you taking the responsibility to either have a trainer or do the training yourself, you're now having to ask them a philosophy statement. Well,
Yes.
what did you learn watching that video about how to bring out socks for customers? Oh yeah, I learned that it's really important for the revenue of the company, and also it helps prevent blisters. And yeah, well, okay, well, why is it important? Like, and now we've lost the traction there and the momentum of me watching you practice and then watching you potentially fail in a high stakes situation, which does create the buy in. And the
Hmm.
reason I think it does create the buy in is because most people would assume that they're good at something or that they don't need to improve, or, maybe they don't want to.
Hmm.
Um, then
Yep. Absolutely.
and then something about being in that situation, whether it be a real life customer or with the boss watching you, when you fail, it feels that much worse, and it is a motivator for you to get better.
Well,
Yeah.
can't you just hit the nail on the head with the perfect word there? And that is situation. And that brings us to the next big pitfall of why video training doesn't work is that video training does not ensure that the person can actually do what it is you need them to do. It doesn't ensure that they gain proficiency because adults, I don't know when the switch happens. A lot of the historically great children's television shows like Sesame Street, for example, they've been so successful because children absorb information like a sponge. But at a certain age, for some reason, that turns off and we become adults, and adults learn by doing. And if you think about some of the most critical professions in the industry where literally these people have other people's lives in their hands, doctors, surgeons, airline pilots, they are trained. They are not trained by video. They are not trained by reading a manual, and they don't watch a video on YouTube about how to fly a plane. They spend countless hours of study in the classroom, but then they spend literally hundreds of hours in a simulator before they are allowed to actually even begin to fly a plane without people in it. And the reason why is because the cost is so high for error. But the paradigm shift that I think we have to have in the business world or the retail world is that the stakes are just as high for us because your newest part-time person that you've just hired, you know what? I don't have time to train you today, so just go out on the floor and help people the best that you can. That person has the life of your business in their hands with that customer. And I think that that's something that we just too often forget is that people don't learn by watching, people don't learn by shadowing, people learn by doing. And that's what a video cannot replicate.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think that the good takeaway for that example with like an airline pilot is that they don't practice. It's not like they hop in the simulator and say, all right, let's say you're piloting this craft. It's a Boeing 737, and we've already taken off. So don't worry about that. And now we're cruising at 10,000 feet and you're climbing up to our cruising altitude. So, yeah, we'll just do this for about 30 minutes. That's not
Mm-hmm.
what you practice in a simulator. You know what they practice is
No.
takeoff, landing, the two most dangerous parts of the airplane ride. And also, okay, your left engine went out and now you have to land this plane. We talk about the situations that are hard. We simulate situations that are very difficult, that really test you. And it's like, I remember growing up, people are like, what is the point of tests? What are the point of these high stress situations, which causes kids so much anxiety? And, I think to a certain point, tests could be made better. But at the same time, tests as a theory, like the theory behind a test, is that it puts you in a high stress situation and sees how you perform, because those are the situations that matter. When you're flying and you've got 200 people on your plane and your left engine goes out, what happens? I mean, any pilot who has ever come out of one of those situations unscathed or with, everyone intact or minimum amount of damage done to the plane or to the passengers, those people are quoted as saying, yeah, I've just been put in this situation hundreds of times because I have to do this training like at least once a year. And then before I ever have passengers on my plane, I've been in this situation before.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point. And the takeaway for the retailers out there is that if you have an employee that cannot or won't bring out socks for customers, which can be a big, revenue and items per transaction builder, is put them in a situation. All right, I'm going to be this kind of customer and I want you to try and pull out a sock for me and let's see how it feels. If it's really awkward, give them some coaching, give them some feedback, watch, observe them, be an actual owner, be a coach.
Yep. And the final piece of it, of why video training doesn't work is, the word that we love to use so much in our company, and that is accountability. Is the simulation, the practice, number one, ensures that they can do it because you show them how, and then you flip the script and you make sure that they can demonstrate the behavior that you are looking for. Then that gives you, once you feel that, okay, someone is ready to go out on the floor, or someone is proficient enough that you feel ready for them to be in front of your customers in whatever type of business that you have. But then this gives you the opportunity to be a player coach and be that coach. And through observation and continual development, you can see not only where they're struggling and where the opportunities to go back and fine tune those simulations and those practices to help them continue to build that skill. But then you can also really see what they do well. And then that gives the opportunity for then positive feedback and the potential for rewards as
Yeah,
well.
that's a good point too. That feedback doesn't necessarily have to be just negative or just
No.
constructive. It can be very positive. And I think if you're doing it correctly, most of the time it should be very positive. And if you're doing things right within your company, there can be negative, there can be constructive feedback, constructive criticism, but it should always be in the spirit of continual improvement. Cool. So, Tony, I think that we've hit this pretty hard. I think this is a extremely important topic for our listeners. And if you've made it to the end of the podcast club, I would absolutely encourage you to reach out to us for tips on how to start implementing real-time coaching, because this is a responsibility for your managers. I think one of the forgotten roles of a manager is people development. And I think if you're
Mm-hmm.
not developing your people that report to you or work under you, there's a big opportunity there for you to develop your coaching skills and for your people to be developed, and not just make the excuse of, I can't find good people.
Mm-hmm.
So appreciate you coming on, Tony. It was a long time coming, and I know you'll be on future ones.
This was cool doing the first one here. I appreciate you having me. And yeah, I look forward to the next
Of
one.
course. All right. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll talk to you next time. That's it for this episode. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave a review on our iTunes channel. We'll see you next week.